house that looked back. I moved into the apartment on a Wednesday, the kind of day that already feels like an ending. The building was a tired 3-story block off a main road. The paint, the same color as cigarette ash, windows dull with age. I'd taken the lease because it was cheap, close to work, and the landlord didn't ask many questions. After the breakup, I just wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere no one knew my name. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Even in Johannesburg, you can usually hear traffic, distant voices, dogs barking. Here, there was nothing. Just the occasional pop from the pipes and the low hum of the fridge. The unit was small. 1 bedroom, a kitchenette, a bathroom the size of a closet. The walls were that off-white that's meant to look clean, but always feels a little greasy. I unpacked in silence, trying not to think about the apartment's smell. Not bad exactly, just faintly lived in, like paper and dust that had soaked up breath. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I turned off the light, the dark pressed closer, thick as velvet. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint scratching. I told myself it was rats. Every building has them. But the sound was wrong. Too slow, like fingertips dragging along plaster. I knocked on the wall, and it stopped instantly. The next morning, I asked the woman next door, flat 3B, name on the mailbox was M. Botha, if she'd heard anything strange. She blinked like I'd interrupted her from far away. No rats here, she said. The walls are solid. Old building. Then she smiled too long, like she'd practiced it in a mirror, and closed the door. I tried to ignore it. I kept myself busy with work, stayed late at the factory, anything to keep from coming home too early. But every night when I sat down, the apartment seemed to lean toward me. The ceiling lights buzzed faintly. The air felt dense. On the 4th night, I decided to record the sound. I left my phone on the bedside table, screen down, voice recorder running. In the morning, I listened. For the first half hour, nothing. Then, I heard myself turning in bed, muttering in sleep. A few seconds later, another voice, low, nearly whispering, answered. It was too faint to make out the words, but it matched my rhythm exactly, like an echo that knew what came next. I tried again the next night. Same thing. My own voice, then a second, buried under the static. I boosted the audio and put on headphones. This time I could make out a few words. Don't. Look. That was all. I told myself it could be interference. Maybe someone else's phone nearby, radio bleed, anything. But when I checked the waveform, there were only 2 distinct voices. Mine, and something else in the same room. I didn't tell anyone. I just started leaving the lights on. A week later, while making coffee, I noticed something odd. The wall behind the fridge had a faint outline, like a rectangle drawn beneath the paint. I pressed it and felt a hollow thud. There was a vent cover, painted over, almost invisible. I pried it loose with a butter knife. Behind it was a small dark cavity. I aimed my phone's flashlight inside and froze. There were objects in there, a crumpled receipt, a cracked lighter, a photograph curled with age. What was the cavity? Photo showed a man standing in a kitchen that looked exactly like mine. Same tiles, same counter. He was smiling, but his face was blurred, as if the camera had caught in mid-movement, or maybe like it hadn't wanted to remember him clearly. On the back, someone had written, "He doesn't sleep anymore." I dropped it and stepped back. The air coming out of the vent was cold, stale, like something that hadn't moved in years. I sealed it up and pretended I hadn't seen it. That night, the scratching came back, louder, and this time it wasn't just from one wall. It circled the room, moving behind me as I turned my head. When I whispered stop, it stopped. I didn't sleep at all. In the morning, I found a note slipped under my door. Plain paper, block letters written with shaking hand. Don't talk to the man in the mirror. I stood there for a long time, staring at the words. My building didn't have security cameras. No one ever came this far down the hall. I went to Botha's door, knocked, no answer. I pressed my ear to the wood. From inside came a faint sound like breathing, but slower than any normal breath. By that evening, I'd convinced myself it was a prank. Maybe kids, maybe my own exhausted brain. I went to brush my teeth before bed and caught my reflection lagging half a heartbeat behind my movements, just enough to notice. When I raised my arm, the reflection hesitated, then caught up. I stood there, muscles stiff, watching. Then the light flickered, and the delay vanished. I tried again, perfectly normal. I told myself I was overtired, but I slept with the bathroom door shut and the towel covering the mirror. A few days passed. I didn't hear the scratching, and I began to feel foolish. Until one night, just before dawn, someone knocked on my door. 3 slow knocks, spaced evenly. I opened it to see a man, about my age, standing there, wearing a faded blue jacket. His eyes looked sunken, sleepless. "Sorry to bother you," he said, "but have you been hearing noises?" I nodded, relief flooding me. Finally, someone else. "Yes, in the walls." He looked confused. "No, from your apartment." That stopped me. "Mine?" He nodded. "Every night, around 3. Talking, sometimes laughing. I live upstairs. Thought maybe you had a TV on. I don't." He frowned, like he didn't quite believe me. Then he said, "Well, just keep it down." He turned and walked toward the stairwell. The next morning I went upstairs to apologize, just in case, but the door above mine had no number. The space where it should be was blank paint. I asked the landlord later that day. "There's no flat above you," he said. "Top floor ends at 3C. You're 2A. I went home early, sat in the kitchen, staring at the ceiling until the sun went down. That night, when I finally lay down, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate. The next few days blurred. I stopped going to work. Every time I tried to leave, something about the hallway felt wrong. Longer than before, the light dimmer. The doors looked the same, but the numbers were rearranged. On the 5th morning I found the note again, slid under my door. Same message. This time, though, when I turned it over, there was new writing on the back. "He can hear you now." I didn't know what that meant, until I caught myself speaking out loud to no one. It wasn't a choice. Words just slipped out when the apartment grew too quiet. Little phrases like, "I'm still here," or "I didn't do anything." And sometimes, from inside the walls, a whisper answered, "I know." I tried to drown it out with music, podcasts, anything. But after a while, every voice on the recording began to sound like mine. 3 nights ago, everything came apart. I'd left the light on again, lying on the bed with my phone recording beside me. Around 2, the bulb flickered and went out. I reached for the lamp, but my hand brushed something cold on the sheet beside me. When I turned on the phone's flashlight, I saw an indentation on the mattress, as if someone had just gotten up. The air smelled like wet earth. I grabbed my keys, bolted for the door. The handle wouldn't turn, twisted harder, until it snapped clean off in my hand. Then, from behind me, a whisper. "Stay." I spun around. The vent behind the fridge was open again. The dark hole gaped wider, the paint around it crumbling. Something shifted inside. I backed toward the wall, breathing fast, but curiosity, or maybe something else, made me lift the phone light again. 2 eyes stared back. They were mine. I don't remember what happened after that. When I woke up, it was morning. The vent was sealed again, perfectly smooth, no sign of damage. My phone was still recording. I pressed play. The last thing it captured before the battery died was my own voice, whispering, "I see you now." I tried to call the landlord, but the number on the lease went to a disconnected line. I went downstairs to the office, empty, dust on everything, cobwebs in the corners. That's when I realized the silence outside wasn't just the apartment. The entire building was quiet. I walked the hall, knocking on doors. No one answered. When I looked through the window facing the street, I saw cars moving, people walking. but no sound came through the glass. It was like watching another world, separated by something thicker than air. That was yesterday. Since then, I've heard the voice more clearly. It speaks from behind the walls, under the floor, inside the mirror when I forget to cover it. It tells me things about myself I shouldn't know, memories I'd forgotten, phrases I'd never said aloud. It says it's tired of waiting. I don't know what it wants, but I think I understand the note now. Because tonight, while I was washing my hands, I caught my reflection smiling a second too long after I stopped. And when I turned away, it didn't. When I turned away from the mirror, I froze. The apartment was impossibly still. No hum of the fridge, no faint buzz from the ceiling light, not even the distant echo of cars outside. It was the kind of silence that presses into your chest and makes your own heartbeat sound obscene in its volume. I backed toward the bedroom, but the floor felt different, warped, softer than it should. I pressed my hand against it, and it gave slightly, like thin wood over some hidden cavity. My phone, still recording, lay face down. I didn't dare pick it up. Instead, I moved cautiously, listening for the faintest sound, the whisper, the shift of air. Then it came, a soft tap, tap, tap. Not from the wall, not from the floor, but from inside the apartment itself, moving toward me with impossible slowness. Every step seemed to vibrate through my bones. I told myself it was a dream. I kept repeating it, out loud, trying to anger myself. This isn't real. None of this is real. The tapping stopped. Silence again. Then the whisper. Low, careful, deliberate. You've always known. My stomach turned. Known what? I asked, my voice barely audible. Your place, it's never been yours. Not really. You've been visiting, observing, and now, finally, you stay. I stumbled backward and fell against the wall, pressing my hands against the cold plaster. Something in the air had changed. It wasn't just stillness anymore. The space felt alive, like it was breathing around me, aware of every motion. I realized then what the vent had been for. It wasn't for hiding objects, or even hiding people. It was a doorway, a passage. Way for whoever, or whatever, had been sharing this space with me, to reach across the thin membrane separating my reality from theirs. I remember crawling toward the vent, irrationally compelled, and finding my hand sliding across a smooth surface that felt impossibly deep. A phone slipped from my pocket and illuminated the darkness inside. I could see faint shapes, my own belongings, old notebooks, clothes I didn't remember owning, photographs of apartments that looked like mine but weren't. Then the voice spoke again, closer now, directly behind me. Look, really look. I turned slowly, expecting to see something monstrous. But there was no one, just the mirror in the hallway, reflecting me perfectly. Or almost perfectly. My reflection hesitated a fraction of a second before moving. It smiled too wide, too knowing. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My hands lifted of their own accord, pointing toward the reflection. It copied me, but then tilted its head in a way I never would. I realized then that it wasn't me in the mirror. It was something that had learned me, memorized me, mirrored me, waited until it could take my place. And yet, at the same moment, I understood that I had been intruding too, on this apartment, on this presence. The vent, the walls, even the mirror, they weren't meant to terrify me. They were meant to teach me, to make me see the fragile line between observer and participant, between reality and the space beyond it. I don't remember moving after that. All I know is that when I blinked, I was outside the building, the street bustling with sound again, the cars honking, the normal chaos of the city pressing in. The apartment looked abandoned, paint peeling, windows dark. Nothing inside suggested it had ever been lived in, except my keys in my pocket, and the recording still running. I played the recording once. My voice was there, my voice, but layered beneath it, faint and deliberate, was another. Calm, patient, almost amused. "I've been waiting," it said. "I've never gone back. I don't think I could. But I still dream of the apartment, of the mirrored reflection, of that cold vent and the whispers beneath the floor. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, I hear it again, repeating my words, echoing me back, and I wonder, if I ever returned, who'd be waiting behind the mirror, and who would step out to take my place. Some nights, when the world is silent enough, I can almost hear the tapping again, soft and careful, like footsteps pacing just beyond the walls of reality, waiting for me to notice once more. And I know that if I ever do, I won't be able to leave. If you enjoy our stories, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to our channel. Sleep tight.